And so it just seems to me like, you know, as far as the Mormon Church itself, I just don't understand how you could possibly put that with anarchism, especially given the fact that the Mormon Church is not like the heretical sects of the ancient Jews, like Jesus was in. It's like you said, it's very similar to Islam. They're fundamentalist religions in a lot of ways, in the sense that it's a closed system. You know, the prophet says something, that's it. That's what the prophet says. That's the truth. You know, that's the word of God. You know, anyway, I really need to go to the bathroom. So anyway, so aside from that second point I was going to make was, you know, as far as like violating the laws, it's true they did violate the laws, but like for reactionary reasons. I mean, so did the South. You know, they violated the laws. The whole point of like polygamy is not like some swinging lifestyle. Like everyone's like, oh, let's go, you know, have several wives. It's like we had a polygamist that worked at Wendy's when I worked there. And I was like, and she's like just trying to defend it as like a democratic right, and I'm like, oh, okay, well then you defend like women being able to marry multiple men, and she's like, oh, of course not, you know, that's horrible. I can't even imagine that, you know, men are the providers, you know, how can we possibly support that? I'm like, no, I mean, well, okay, maybe you're against it morally, but are you against it legally? She's like, absolutely, we can't possibly support a law that would allow that. So, you know, and it's not just polygamy.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, I don't know. So generally, whenever they did it, like when they disobeyed laws, it had nothing to do with anything like against this. It was against the state, but like whatever progressive laws existed in the 1800s, you know, which were like none. The Mormons opposed them generally. You know, Brigham Young, and I know that you probably are like more for the early Mormon Church, but Brigham Young, you know, wanted to make Utah a slave-supporting territory. In 1852, because they wanted rich Mormons from the South to move there, you know. So I don't know, so in my experience, when I talk to radicalizing workers, it inevitably gets to a point where you got to talk about Mormonism and break from it, because there's no way that I've ever seen anyone become radical and stay Mormon. The Mormon Church despises you. I'm shocked that you haven't been kicked out of the church, frankly.
Well, let me say this. I mean, I'm not trying to say that there was like an early period of the church that like everything was like perfect. There were really good things about the early period of the church in terms of economics, like system, but there are also super bad things, you know. Obviously the racism, you know, was really bad. Treatment of Native Americans wasn't good here. There's a lot of things that Brigham Young did and said that obviously I totally disagree with. So it's not to like say, oh, there's this like golden age of like early Mormonism when everything was perfect. Yeah, there's plenty of reactionary aspects and things they did. But the point in bringing up, say, the issue of like disobeying the government to practice polygamy, the point is to make people who say, talking about that article of faith that says you're supposed to obey the government all the time no matter what, the point is to say, well, no, there's plenty of times, for good reasons or for bad, whatever, that Mormons disobeyed the government. And in terms of polygamy, I think polygamy should be legal. There are versions of monogamous marriage that resemble slavery. There are versions of polygamous marriage that resemble slavery. The question is that something that people want to be involved in, and do they have the choice? Is it a free choice? And the problem with polygamy being illegal is that it allows these polygamous groups to be super isolated and secretive, and people do get stuck where they want to leave that life, but like they can't, you know. And so if it was legal and people weren't ostracized for being polygamist, then it would allow people to freely do it if they want, and you know, if they don't want to do it, then they don't have to, and there wouldn't be like 15-year-olds getting married to 40-year-olds, which again happens with monogamous marriages too in other countries, and that's just because it's monogamous marriage doesn't make marrying a 15-year-old okay, and just because it's a polygamous marriage doesn't make it wrong, but if the girl's 15, then yeah, that's a terrible thing. So, and this lady that you encountered, I would obviously disagree with her. I think it would be fine for women to marry more than, have like 5 husbands. I think it's fine for, you know, gay, lesbian, bisexual people to get married. I think Proposition 8 was a really bad thing. And in my view, why are Mormons upset about, you know, gay people get married? we were practicing polygamy. That's what we wanted to do, and people, the government was all made that illegal, etc. If we wanted that right for ourselves, even though most Mormons today also would strongly condemn polygamy. But hey, if that's what we wanted to do, then if gay people want to get married, yeah, that's not my business. Tell them they can't, let them do what they want to do. At any rate, with people who are sympathetic to anarchist ideas who are also Mormon, we also take a really different view, even though we do stay in the church, just like Dorothy Day stayed in the Catholic Church, even though Ammon Hennessy was in the Catholic Church for a while, but then later left it. So that's kind of a decision that each person has to make. Do you stick within this institution, which has a lot of problems and is reactionary in many ways, or do you leave it? It's just kind of be up to each person. But again, Mormons who are sympathetic to these ideas, we do take a different idea to say, like, the leadership of the church. If they say to go vote for Prop 8, I'd just be like, no, I think that's wrong. And if they say that, like back in the past, LDS leaders did this or that about blacks and racism, and I was like, well, that's fine. If you want to say that, I don't agree with it. If you want to kick me out of church, you're welcome to kick me out of church. But bottom line is, these basic ideas that I think are the right way to live, anarchist ideas and socialist ideas, are present in the Book of Mormon and in the Doctrine and Covenants. And so for that reason, even though there are definitely obviously things I dislike about contemporary Mormonism, at the same time I'm really proud to be Mormon for these other reasons that most Mormons that you talk to would be like, oh, that's not even part of Mormonism, or you know what I mean? So
I was going to ask, would it not be more beneficial to take the principles and teachings of Christ, being, love thy neighbor, etc., in a outside of an institution like the Catholic Church or the Mormon Church or any other kind of church, because, like you said, they have started wars or they've supported wars over and over again. And so would it not be just more beneficial to take out that hierarchical structure, because that's what it is basically a prophet telling us what to do. And so would it not be better to just have a personal relationship with God and yourself, and just be the best person that you possibly can be, rather than being the best person that you can be while also being Mormon, where the church has, kind of counteractive things.
yeah, well, like I said, you could kind of go either way. Again, Ammon Hennessy, he converted to Christianity while he was in prison, but he wasn't a member of any church. Because of the influence of Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker, he got baptized as a Catholic. And then some years later, I was actually just reading this yesterday, kind of him describing why he left the Catholic Church, because for kind of the reasons you just said. But at the same time, being a socialist isn't about, or it might be being an anarchist isn't about just doing your own thing necessarily. It's about being part of a community. And so think about in, Mormon congregations in Latin America where people go to church every week. They fast once a month and give the money, to the church. And then when if an emergency comes up or a crisis hits, people don't have money for food or to pay their rent or whatever, they go to the bishop and say, hey, I'm having a hard time. Can you help me out? And the bishop's like, okay. Obviously, it doesn't always work perfectly. But the point is, there's a congregation, and it becomes like a social welfare system where people know each other, meet every week, are able to take care of each other and help each other. And so that's a big part of being a socialist. So even though the church in many ways is super reactionary, it could, and it does actually function in many positive ways for people to take care of each other, in ways that don't have anything to do with the state or with the government. And so I think that's really positive. The other thing too is that before I was like left wing, growing up, I didn't really think about politics at all. I really like playing soccer and skiing. That's about all I like to do. And I remember when, after 9/11, for example, I remember I was at BYU at the time, I think it was maybe like a sophomore, and I remember waking up in the morning, my roommate's like, dude, come out here to the TV, you'll never believe this. And I walked out there and watching the planes fly in, and then when the bombing in Afghanistan started, I thought that was a pretty good idea. I just didn't know any better, you know. But at that time, I had just gotten back off my mission, and I guarantee you, I loved people so much. I was like so much better of a person than I am now. But I was just like ignorant politically and hadn't thought through all these things. And so when it came time to like, hey, let's go bomb Afghanistan, even though I would have never wished anything bad on anybody, I was like, oh, I guess that seems like a good idea. So a lot of Mormons, you know, partly they're Mormon, but partly they're American. And just like most Americans are reactionary, warmongers, etc., so also are most Mormons. Is that because they're Mormon? Is it because they're American?